Well, looky here. We've got the gun that spawned an empire of dominance, where you can get anything from 9mm handguns to horse cum. Today on Clone or Die. Now I know what you're thinking. You're doing a Glock video. Glocks are so played out. Everyone's done a video on Glocks. Nobody watches that. Nobody wants to see it. Well, with the recent announcement of the end of the Gen 5 1-5 series of pistols and the new Gen V pistols, I figured there was no better time to cover a Glock. And I'm going to cover a Glock that's a little bit more interesting than your standard one. So here I've got the reproduction of the Gen 1 Glocks, the P80. That were made a few years ago. Sorry, Espo, I know yours is a real Gen 1 and mine is a reproduction one, but goddamn, every time I see that mag-mounted flashlight, I want to die. I hate that. So for these, they came upon the designation of P80 because that is when the program started for the Austrian military to replace their pistols, and it ultimately resulted in the finalized pistol coming around in 1982.
Okay, we've got like the Glock pistol we are talking about today. You know, like the best thing to come out of Austria since, well, you know, I love his paintings. Yes, this will do the job for the Austrian military. Truly fantastic pistol that the Gaston came up with.
Now, by no means was Glock the first company to produce a 9mm striker-fired polymer handgun. But they do have the distinction of being the first company to actually do it good. Sorry, HK, I love your products, but those initial tries were not exactly what we'd like to call bangers. And very uniquely, this comes from a man, Gaston Glock, who had zero experience manufacturing firearms, essentially developing this pistol in his basement shop for what we now call the standard of handguns in 2025.
Okay, so for this next drill, we have the Pack of Crazed Rapist drill. Unfortunately, in Europe, this has become very common, so we need to start training this drill for the realistic scenarios that we might encounter. Get your hands off mine, Johnson!
Now, while the P80, the Glock 17, was first produced in 1982, it was not actually imported in the United States until 1986. And then, in 1988, Gen 2 replaced the first generation of pistols, so Gen 1 Glocks were only imported into the United States for 2 years before being replaced by the updated generation. So it makes those Gen 1 pistols a little bit more rare. That's why it was really nice for Glock, with their collaboration with Lipsies as a distributor, to do these 2020 edition Gen 1 Glocks and remake the frames. Although they do have Gen 2, Gen 3 internals, the slide finish is a more modern coating, not the original finish on the older series of Glocks. I have an older one I'll show to compare. But I love it when companies do this retro classic stuff. SIG did the same thing with the PQ-26 for its anniversary. They released a non-railed old school version. And I love this. I want to see companies do more of this kind of thing.
You know, the good thing about being Austrian is like you get to shirk all the responsibility to the Germans. So like you start the war and the Germans come and then you lose the war and you got to blame the Germans. Great time. And then, you know, another war happens, you know, Germany annexes you, yeah, good time, you're fighting with them, and then Germany loses the war, and then you get to blame the Germans again. You get to go, oh, we're not Germans, we're Austrians, very different, yeah. It's fantastic, it's a great time being Austrian.
So I am going to note, the Austrians and the Germans are still basically using P38s, P1s, left over from essentially World War II era technology. The Austrians look for a new pistol and finalize their replacement in 1982. The Germans do not actually end up replacing their handgun until over 10 years later with the USP. Regardless of whenever Glock first came into the United States, it was not accepted at first. Basically, the boomers didn't like the Tupperware gun. They were not big fans. All metal, hammer-fired handguns still ruled the day. It took a little bit longer for polymer handguns to be able to be accepted in the United States. Now, generally this acceptance came in the 80s and 90s when law enforcement are starting to switch away from revolvers to semi-automatic handguns. Glock very smartly targets those communities and is able to market to them very effectively to get law enforcement to switch over to Glocks. Ultimately, that resulted in 65% of United States law enforcement use Glock models to this day. So they dominate over half of that market, even in 2025.
I love mine American gangster rap, and the kill count is so high in Chicago, I figure I would try some of their techniques. Probably works pretty good, yeah.
How did I end up with this pistol? Well, as I mentioned earlier, when these came out in 2020, I went and bought one. I've owned this gun for 5 years. The reason I got it was because I had Gen 2 through 5 Glocks, and I didn't have a Gen 1 Glock. So I wanted a Gen 1 to round out the collection. Now, I'm not the biggest Glock fanboy in the world. There are certainly others that are much more into it than I am. But I think it's neat having the complete history of how the guns have evolved over time. It's kind of interesting to note like features that are outdated, like the smooth frame before they had really any stippling or grip texture on them. The crappy Euro sights, unfortunately, which Glocks still come with. But I love comparing this to the modern pistols and definitely seeing how things are a product of their time. I think it's kind of funny. For the Glock, especially being a pistol first produced in 1982, a lot of people have the perception of Glock being a newer gun, and guns that are technically newer than the Glock, like the Beretta 92FS, the SIG 226, which didn't exist until later in the 80s, are newer guns. Now, granted, those designs are older. The SIG P220 goes back to the 70s. The original Beretta 92 design also goes back to the 70s. But there is that perception of these being newer guns. Now, the Glocks have, of course, changed over time from this original first generation version. In 1988, as I mentioned before, we have the introduction of the Generation 2 of Glocks. Now, this is where we get the 2 pins on the frame. This is to handle heavier duty cartridges like 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP. And now we have the Glock stippling on the front and back. This one has one of the vintage Surefires, but this gun does not feature a rail. You also see the finish is slightly different than the slide finish on the P80. This is a original Generation 2, so this is closer to what the Gen 1s would have actually looked like. This is more like kind of what the modern Glocks look like on the reproduction. Then going from here, Glock was actually one of the very earliest companies to start putting rails on their pistols with the Gen 3s, which come out in 1998, 1999. Funny enough, The Matrix is actually the first movie to feature Gen 3 Glocks. So we move from that over to our third generation. Now we have the finger grooves added to the frame. We have the little divot for your thumb, kind of stupid. We retain the bad sights. I have replaced them on this one. And we have the accessory rail for utilizing flashlights, which I currently have the Surefire X300. We are retaining that 2-pin design on the frame to deal with, again, those heavier duty cartridges like 40 Smith & Wesson that are popular at the time, kind of fallen out of favor these days. Funny enough, for the P80, they were upgraded by the Austrian military. The Austrian military they were still using their original Gen 1 P80s in 2002, and they decided they wanted to upgrade to Gen 3s. So they took their slides off and the barrels, and they sent the frames back to Glock, and in the deal, Glock sent them new frames with the updated internals and new recoil assemblies, and they put their P80 slides on Gen 3 frames, and that's how they're running them. I think it's kind of neat, like if you wanted to build a modern Austrian military P80, you would have to get the little logo put on. The reproductions don't have it, but you could very easily get that laser engraved on and get one of these pistols and put them on a Gen 3 frame. I have seen one in civilian hands in Europe, a Gen 3 P80. I've never seen one in civilian hands in the United States, but technically using these 2 pistols, you could build one. I think that would be pretty cool. Going from Gen 3, we of course have Gen 4. Now I don't have a Gen 4 that is not stippled, so I have my Gen 4 here. Redesign of the recoil system, so it functions a little bit different. Redesign of the frame, still has the finger grooves. I liked the texture on the frame, but I did the stippling on this one. I really like this pistol. Gen 4 personally feels and shoots the best to me. So I like Gen 4 the best, even more than Generation 5 pistols. I'm just one of those people where the finger grooves fit my hands, so I really don't mind the finger grooves that much. But I understand if you have larger hands, if you have smaller hands than me, they don't fit your hands, you're not gonna like them. Totally understand why they went to that with Gen 5. That was something that people complained about for decades before they finally decided to do something to change it. And from here, we go to the Gen 5. I do not have a Gen 5 Glock 17. I'm sorry, I've got a 19X though. And we delete the finger grooves. We add an aggressive texturing. They retain the recoil system of the Gen 4s, the updated one dual spring. And they delete the 2-pin design, going back to the 1-pin design due to updates in materials and technology. 1 pin can handle 40 Smith & Wesson again, although I think they don't even really need to make Gen 5 40 Smith & Wesson pistols. And from here is where we will be going to Gen B, which will most likely just be the same thing with a redesigned hammer assembly to prevent the use of switches holding down the disconnector. And then potentially maybe Gen 6. We'll see where it is from there, but that's the complete lineup as it stands right now from 1 to 5. Hopefully I get a Glock 17M sometime soon. I want that one especially, but that's what we have.
POV, you're on O block and some shooters just came. We're gonna teach them a lesson. Won't catch them in my hood.
Oh no, one more Glock. So this, I wanted to show as an example of the customizability of Glocks. These days, you can build an entire Glock without using a single Glock part. This is an older one too. This is my Zevtech Dragonfly Glock 17. They don't even make this stuff anymore. Zevtech is onto their own FCU system, which is pretty neat. I used this as a competition gun for a number of years before going to an X5 226, which is what I use now. Still to this day, I love X5s. They're my favorite handgun to use for competition. Although some 2011s like the Staccato are slowly maybe making up some ground there. But anyway, just to show you the customizability of these guns, where Glock is truly the one platform other than the 1911 that has become universal, where so many companies are making parts for them. There's all kinds of things you can get, from slides with cuts to them, with your optics cuts, with your different iron sights, your different barrels and colors, and your different frame colors, your different magwells, your different extended magazines that you can get. This one's a Terran one. Your different slide releases, your different magazine releases. The Gen 4, Gen 5, I don't really think need an extended magazine release. I like it as is. The Gen 1 through 3 kind of suck pretty bad. Just something that highlights the customizability of these pistols, because I can't really make a video without saying it. But the nature that these have become, like the build your own gun, the Barbie gun, the polymer 80s even that exist now, where you can build one entirely from scratch. These are like the AR-15 of the handgun world. And they're a lot easier to put together than a 1911 is. A 1911 is kind of a pain in the ass because you got to hand fit everything. Everything is just plug and play with this bad boy. Now, how did we end up with these pistols? Well, Gaston did something crazy. When the contract is announced and he finds out about it and he decides he's going to submit a pistol for trials, his own design, he gets a couple of handguns, sets up a range in his basement, experiments with those, and then what he does is absolutely wild. He goes out and he asks civilian competition shooters, law enforcement, military shooters, what did they want to see in a handgun? That's a wild concept to actually do that for a government contract, and he ultimately ended up creating a box. I make fun of it a little bit for its looks. It doesn't look sexy like something like a Beretta, but goddamn does it have a good reputation and is a good handgun. I think something wild for these pistols is the fact that he did that. All too often, A company will give a government exactly what they're asking for in a military contract, but ultimately what they're asking for is stupid. So they just end up with a gun that is bad. In my research for this video, I found a ton of 80s, 90s era US advertising for Glock pistols. This is kind of where the tagline Glock Perfection came from. And I gotta say, I just love it. I love how they advertise this pistol. I'll throw them up on screen. They threw shade at other companies. They did not give a fuck. And honestly, I wish gun companies advertised like that today. It's so milquetoast compared to like the war they were fighting in the 90s. But Glock's advertising was really kind of key to changing the perception of this pistol. The advertising to police departments, as I mentioned earlier, where they're switching over from the revolvers, in the 90s, as the sort of threats that police officers were facing were starting to change, a 6-shot, 12-pound double-action trigger pull revolver just wasn't going to cut it anymore. And hey, you have a 9mm 17-shot semi-automatic handgun you can reload in less than 2 seconds right here. You can do that with a revolver if you're Jerry Mitchellek, if you're very trained, very fast. Most police officers are not. So this was truly a game changer for departments. Now, that perception of police officers adopting this also changes the public perception, because people are typically going to want to choose what cops carry. Obviously, I think that's a fairly decent metric for a good handgun. Similar, exactly the same as the military. When the Beretta M9 was adopted, when the P320, M18, M17 were adopted, people look at that and they want to buy that because that's what the military is using now. And it's a decent metric for, okay, this is a good handgun, a large government organization has adopted this, let's take it out. Now, you combine that with a handgun that's actually really good, and you've got an amazing combination. Now, for my equipment in this video, not the route I would typically go down. Usually I'm trying to be pretty accurate when I'm representing a specific unit or a specific time period. This one was more general. The Austrian military is a European military, and many European militaries don't spend very much money on their military, so they oftentimes have to make use of a lot of old and outdated equipment. The standard issue vest for the Austrian military is not body armor. It is like this crappy Alice compatible vest that they put these pouches on. And it's just not very good or very modern. The Austrian military does use the newer A3 AUGs, but they also have a lot of Sturmgewehr 77A1 AUGs that they still utilize to this day because they don't have enough guns for everyone. So I've gone down the route of maybe the standard Austrian soldier, which I do have pictures of Austrian soldiers like this as well, that maybe are a little bit more knowledgeable and they private purchase a lot of their equipment. So that's kind of the route I've gone down for today's video. I am wearing the standard Austrian uniform, kind of this sage green, ranger green-esque color, although they have recently adopted a camouflage pattern that is very unique and very cool. Amazingly, they're a European military that hasn't just went with multicam like every other European military. So I've got my ranger green JPC on, standing in with all of my AUG mags, my radio set up. My belt is black because I'm not buying a green one, and this would be perfectly acceptable by Austrian military standards. I have a multicam belt, I have a coyote belt, I have a black belt, I'm not buying a green one. And this I can utilize with I have my S-Tacs right here for my Glock mags. Then I've got a first spear pouch back here. These work fine for AUG mags as well. I've got my LBT blowout kit, just the one that I happen to prefer. And my Safariland for my Glock 17 or the various Glocks that I was using today. This will work for Glock 19s just fine. That's why I typically, while I do own Glock 19s, I buy Glock 17 holsters because it will fit both pistols without issue. Something a little bit more unique is I've got a reproduction of an OpsCore Sentry helmet on. These are the mid-cut helmet similar to the Mitch 2002, but they're based on the OpsCore helmet profile. These are something that, while kind of rare in the US, are actually fairly popular overseas. The Israeli military uses these, the Austrian military uses these, the Turkish military, just to name a few, are typically seen utilizing these helmets. Now, granted, the Austrians use a mix. You can see them with the older equipment and the older helmets as well. But these are what the up-to-date current issue would be for them. So, while I'm not representing specifically any unit or specifically any soldier, I'm just the well-off, the well-knowledge private purchase soldier for this particular video. So a little bit simpler than what I would like to do for most videos, but still good, very, very good. Still would be perfectly within what they are allowed to wear as an Austrian soldier. So I think it makes up for it. Of course, there are US military Glocks. The US military has used the Glock 17, the Glock 22, the Glock 34, the Glock 19, the Glock 26. And hey, I might cover clones of those sometime in the future, but I really wanted to start where it all began for Glock, with that original Gen 1 P80. I like starting at the beginning and then going forward because it can really help you appreciate the history, the progression, how technology has changed. Now, with the recent announcement of the new Glock V series, so soon after the announcement of the end of production for the SCAR, is the Glock dead? No, obviously not. This is one of the most profitable pistols in the world. They are going to continue making them with the V series with probably what is most likely a small hammer redesign to prevent the use of the Glock switches. Granted, Gen 5 pistols already do have a block that prevents the use of a Glock switch. Ironically, Gen 5 pistols are not legal in California, which is the one of the states that is suing them over the fact of that. And it's funny, you know, I don't know, because O-Block Switchian, he can go get a Glock switch, but apparently I can't get one, so I'm a little mad about that. That it's so easy that instead of targeting the ease of which users are getting these devices or getting them into the country to turn these guns into illegal machine guns, no, we should go after the company that has nothing to do with that and just makes semi-automatic handguns. Now, granted, this is a law, regulation, whatever you might call it, from people that fundamentally don't understand it's easier to make a fully automatic handgun than it is to make a semi-automatic gun of any kind, not even necessarily just a handgun. But what can we say? Typical liberal politician not knowing anything about how firearms work, but somehow being able to regulate them and sue one of the largest firearms companies in the world and succeed in getting them to change their design. The V series, more than likely just a stopgap in between Glock Gen 5 and Glock Gen 6. It's been kind of an open secret in the gun industry. They've seen the patents, they're available, you can look them up online, for a potential Glock Gen 6. We know it's something that's coming. And more than likely, it will be something that utilizes an FCU system, so you can have interchangeable frames. Granted, Glock is not the first company to make a Glock that does this. The ZevTech pistols do this. The Ruger RXM also features this. And unfortunately, the cat is kind of out of the bag for Gen 3 Glock pistols. There are so many already on the market, and then there are so many clones of Gen 3 Glock pistols. There's never going to be a stop of, oh, we sued Glock and we stopped the Gen 3 Glock. It's just not a reality that's going to happen. The genie is already out of the bottle. There are millions of Gen 3 Glocks and Gen 3 Glock clones on the market. If a criminal really wants a Glock with a switch, probably somebody who is already a convicted felon and can't even own a handgun anyway. But remember, we're targeting that company instead of the actual criminals. Typical, but perhaps with the future and something like FRTs in a Glock system, I've been seeing them for a lot of handguns, I may be able to finally experience what it's like to have a Glock with a switch. Because I went to the switch store and they said they were out. Unfortunate. But for now, this has been the first generation of Glock, the P80, on Clone or Die, and I'll see you in the next one.